So, Alastair, thank you very much for joining me. I should start off by saying, when I was growing up, so when I was a teenager and in my early 20s, I think you probably the singer who influenced me the most.
Good grief.
I came across a CD.
I'm sorry about that.
No, it was definitely a good thing. Because
Right.
so I came across your Great Aries CD, the Chandos.
The Chandos in English, yeah.
Yes, when I was a lay clerk at Rochester Cathedral.
Okay.
And it's the first time I thought that I would just be set on choral singing,
Right.
which I still do and I still love.
Mm-hmm.
I sing here at St James's once a week.
Mm.
And I never had any thought of going into opera, but I knew at that point, I knew of you, I hadn't heard you. I knew that you had been a lay clerk as well.
I
at
had
one point.
for a couple of years, yeah, 2 or 3 years, part-time.
Okay, and then I was listening to you on this CD and I realised, somebody who's done choral singing can make the transition to opera singing. And I didn't realise that there were some opera singers who had done that before.
You didn't, right? Because
No,
it's,
not at that
it's
time.
quite a well-trodden path.
It is. I was 17 or 18 at the time.
Okay,
so
fair enough.
I didn't.
I'll forgive you.
Thank you. I didn't really have that knowledge. And the other thing, which was very influential on me, was your coloratura ability.
Yes.
It's quite rare for basses.
It is.
Yeah, and I mean, you put Samuel
was.
Raby to shame. With
Well,
the way you can
now,
sing that.
hang on a minute. Hang on. Yes, I just, that was my kind of calling card, and it was something that I had naturally, but I believe it was a lot to do with my instrumental training.
Right.
Because I was a flautist, a flute player, before I became a singer.
Okay.
And I think, and that's all you do as a flute player. You play lots of fast notes because it's quite easy on the flute.
Right.
So I wasn't phased when I saw a page of black notes.
Okay.
I was able to recognise the patterns, and somehow instinctively I was able to imitate that with my voice.
Okay.
Along with the other things that I learnt, which stood me in good stead as a singer from playing the flute, which is posture, breath control,
Right.
as well as a bit of musicality, perhaps. But anyway, we won't talk about that. But yeah, so that was amazing. So I really found a niche there, because as you say, for a bass voice to have that flexibility and coloratura facility is pretty rare.
Yeah.
But I just managed to fill that gap. Apart from the great Sam.
So I mean, what a singer!
Oh my God!
I mean,
amazing.
he became
Amazing technique. Just so reliable.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Did you ever hear him live?
I did, only in rehearsal. Actually, no, I went to a recital of his at the Wigmore very early on, when I was studying, and then I heard him on stage when I was out in San Francisco, and he was rehearsing Boito's Mephistopheles.
Okay.
So I saw him do a few tricks and things.
What was it
Doing
like
his demo.
live? Because I know on the recordings, obviously he sounds amazing, but people have often said it wasn't. You just can't compare it to what you would hear live in an auditorium.
Okay, I mean, yes, very, very, very impressive. I mean, certainly at the Wigmore, amazing. In San Francisco, of course, it's a massive theatre. I mean, that's the trouble with the States. You have auditoria that are sort of 3,000 seats.
Like
So,
football stadiums.
yeah, and so, they tend to look for voices that are bloody loud,
Right.
so that people can hear them at the back. And so, my impression of it then was, it was. I mean, it was big. It was loud enough. It wasn't the biggest thing since sliced bread, but on the other hand, why should it be?
Size isn't everything.
Size, absolutely. Yeah, and a lot of that is to do with having somebody in the pit who's able to, to rein in the forces that you're up against, orchestrally. And as I say, some of those theatres are just so huge. You're on a hide into nothing in a way. And but people get very irate about it. We couldn't hear him. His voice isn't big enough, and you think,
well, it is actually.
it's not, don't. It's something that you get faced with a lot, especially singing the kind of repertoire that I've done. People say, "Oh, I don't think his voice is big enough," or whatever. Well, okay, maybe not. Depending on how you want things to sound, or what kind of voice you're after. The trouble is, the louder the voice, it tends to get pretty ugly. I mean, that's the corollary. I mean, it's very rare to get a voice that is a huge voice that is still also beautiful. And then you get the problems with, vibratos and singing out of tune and things. But yeah, anyway, he was great. I mean, he's just an amazing artist and singer. Perhaps not the most dynamic on stage as an actor, but as a singer, just phenomenal. Yeah.
Going back to your flute playing, and you said you were able to imitate how you did the fast runs in the flute. Was that like a physical sensation you were imitating?
I think not so much. It was just the idea that my voice happened to be flexible enough that I was able to do those coloratura passages in a similar way that I approached them in a similar way that I would looking at it as a flautist, looking at the patterns and where to breathe, which notes are perhaps a little bit more important than others, where to head to. So yeah, I think that was the fact that I was used to seeing that, and when I saw it as a singer, it wasn't anything unusual. I didn't go, "Oh bloody hell, I can't do that." I'm a singer.
Which actually, because it can be terrifying if you see a phrase like that, or a whole aria like that.
Yeah.
For like some of those Rossini bass rolls, there are some beautiful long phrases, and then all of a sudden you have to contrast that with 3 pages of endless runs, and that can be terrifying.
Yes.
And I imagine most people simply just avoid those operas for that reason.
Yes.
And the only way I've been able to do it, so the only big coloratura aria or roll I've done is Mustafa, or in Italiano.
Right.
And the only way I did it, I had to start very slowly.
Right.
And then speed it up. I didn't have that ability from the beginning.
Yeah.
I wasn't a flautist, I was a violist.
Oh, okay.
And
never mind.
I know exactly. There was one point where, when my voice broke, I was a countertenor, a violist, and I was also playing the organ a bit. So I was the butt of everyone's jokes in the music world. And I thought, let's just sing for a bit. Okay, so did you come from a music family, and was the flute something you started early
I started the flute when I was about 13. I changed schools. Before then, I sang in a church choir. I was brought up in northwest London, Wembley, Harrow, and I went to a local church, and then I gave that up and as a voice soprano, when my voice broke. And then at the age of about 13, I changed schools, and so the opportunity arose to learn an instrument. I don't come from a particularly musical family. My father was musical. He had learnt a piano as a young man, so he was very. He liked his music, all sorts. But my mother, as we like to say in the family, had Van Gogh's ear for music. She didn't. She liked a nice tune, and that was about it. But I have her to blame or thank for the fact that I started the flute, because as far as I can remember, my father would say, well, you could, he came from the northeast, and he said his grandfather was a trombonist in a colliery band, and spurned the opportunity to go to Kneller Hall, the military school of music. Silly man, he could have made something of himself. He was a trombonist, but so the trombone was put out there as a possibility. And then my mum chimed in. She said, "Well, what about the flute? It's a lot easier to carry, and it's silvery and it's pretty." And so I don't think I really knew exactly what a flute was then, but But I thought, okay, fine, I'll start flute lessons.
My daughter's just started playing the flute, but it's a full size flute, so it's like
Okay.
got that.
Of course, now you can get these U-bend head joints, so that even smaller people can learn at a younger age, because the business end is a lot closer.
Okay. Well, we got our flute from Lewisham Music Service, and
Yeah.
maybe we forgot to say that she's got a small 6-year-old,
Right,
so she got
yes.
a full size one, and the amount of puff she has to put
Yes.
into each note
Yes.
is it's as if she's playing a trombone. Really.
Yes. I mean, I would tend to think that you can be too young to start a wind instrument.
Yeah, well, having seen her play, she knows the notes, and she can make the sound. It's just, she's much better at the violin at the moment.
Oh,
it's more size violin, and it's much easier, but she loves
brilliant.
it, mainly for the reasons you said. It's silver and it's pretty, so she picks it up and she's like, oh, my flute.
Yes.
But anyway, going back to your flute playing,
Yeah.
you must have had quite a lot of innate musical ability, because if you started at 13, 14, didn't you study flute at conservatoire only a few years later?
Yes, I did.
So you must have progressed quite quickly.
Very, very quickly. I mean, it's the flute isn't the most difficult of instruments. Once you've kind of mastered the blowing bit, and obviously it takes a bit of technique, but the fingering is fairly simple, especially compared with maybe a clarinet or something like that. It's a bit more complicated. But I was very fortunate in that my first flute teacher, peripatetic teacher, he wasn't really a flautist. He was a composer and pianist.
Okay.
He was just doing this as a peripatetic job, to make ends meet, like a lot of people do. And he must have seen something in me fairly early on, that I was able to progress fairly quickly on the flute. And he was an interesting chap, because he'd actually studied at the academy composition and piano, and then went to Paris and studied with Nadia Boulanger.
Oh wow!
So he was a serious. He's still alive, Welsh guy, and he then got me in. He became a kind of guru in a way. In that the flute was my way into music, and then he started, giving me lessons in musicianship, oral training. I had a very, very good ear, I have to say. That was quite an advantage, and so I got through the grades fairly quickly, and then he started me off on had a friend of his, another pianist friend. I started having musicianship lessons with them as well, and they gave me this. I don't know if you've heard of it. This amazing oral book by Hindemith called Elementary Training. No. This red book. It is fierce. Oh my God!
Anything like Hindemith.
I only got through the first sort of 4 or 5 chapters, and then it gets really difficult. I mean, if you've got perfect pitch, I think you've probably got a chance.
Okay.
But if you haven't, which I don't, it's incredibly hard work. But this introduced me to a level of musicianship and theory and oral training that was really quite scary. I presume it was something that he had been taught by his teachers, either at the academy or with Boulanger in Paris. I don't know. And then it got to the stage where I then only lasted at that school for 1 year. My parents, because it was because my elder brother had been at this school. He was 4 years older than me, and he managed the wonderful feat of failing all his O levels. So my parents thought, we don't want the same thing to happen to dear Alastair, our youngest. So they, with a bit of acrimony with the school, they withdrew me. So I then went to a school very near here, actually.
Okay.
Marylebone Grammar School, up near Baker Street, Lisson Grove, which is now defunct. But I went there. At least it was free. It was a public school that I'd been to for that solitary year. But I carried on having lessons with this chap. And piano lessons as well. I'm still a hopeless pianist, and I was terrible then. But and then it was obviously costing my father quite a lot of money doing it privately, and we lived in an area, northwest London, where there were a lot of orchestral players. It was a suburban area, and we knew a lot of people who were instrumentalists, played in the BBC, Symphony, Philharmonia, RPO, and that was another thing, I guess, about me then deciding that I wanted to be a musician. It didn't seem to be that unusual because we knew quite a lot of people who were professional musicians. Anyway, my father, to cut a long story short, put out feelers with his friends who were musicians and say, look, I got this flute teacher for my son and then a piano teacher, and I'm paying this much. Have you heard of them? Are they any good? And the answer came back, no, we don't really know. That's probably too much money, or they're not, we never heard of them. So he decided, okay, that's it, end of lessons, okay. Which was a bit of a blow because I was progressing so well. But then, luckily, because the school I went to was an ILIA-funded school in the London Education Authority, okay. We're talking about the early 80s, actually no, the late 70s. They had a wonderful music school at Pimlico School called the Centre for Young Musicians, okay. Which was fantastic. It was all free. If you got in, you had an hour's lesson on your main instrument. You had 45 minutes on a subsidiary instrument. You had musicianship classes. You could play. They had the London Schools all Symphony Orchestra, all for free.
Amazing.
So my dad thought, that's the one to go for. Yeah. Yes, thank you very much. And I got in, and so then my music education was in the hands of the ILEA, okay, for the next 2 or 3 years.
Okay, and then conservatoire followed after.
And then I just got it into my head. It was the time of James Galway, and
is he the man with the
golden
flute?
Several golden flutes.
Okay,
yes,
right.
And everybody wanted to be James Galway, and it was a very popular instrument at the time, and so I thought, yes, that's what I want to do. Okay. I want to be a flute player. And of course, everybody was telling me at school, well, it's a tough job, it's a tough life, and really, you should have something to fall back on. That's a phrase that has echoed throughout my whole life, actually.
And was your fallback?
Yes.
Oh, I try singing. Then.
Yeah. What are you going to do if that fails? Not many people make it. But of course, being young and slightly, maybe very enthusiastic and foolhardy, I thought, no, I'm going to make this. This is going to be good. Okay. So then I did the flute and got to the Guildhall, where I studied with a very famous pedagogue called Trevor Y, who was a fantastic teacher, but I don't think he really rated me as a player very much. Okay. This was at the Guildhall, and his real sphere of influence was at the Royal Northern. He was the head man up there. Okay. So I think he took a lot more notice of his students up there than he ever did at the Guildhall. So I studied with him for a couple of years, and then he had an argument with the manager and he left. And they weren't the best years of my education, I have to say. It was pretty tough. And then I changed teacher to a lovely chap called Peter Lloyd, who was principal flute at the LSO, and he was much more encouraging. And so then I did 4 years at the Guildhall, and then I studied. I kept up my singing, having been in a church choir as a teenager. It was more like a social club, but I enjoyed singing, and I thought, well, there was an opportunity to stop the piano as a second study, which I didn't enjoy, and do something else of my own choosing. So I thought, well, I'll have some singing lessons. So I then had lessons with an old oratorio bass baritone called Richard Standen, who was a lovely chap, wonderful Bolton accent, and that was fine, just having that as a kind of bit of light relief. Mm-hmm. And he was very good, just English song, some basic exercises, just keep the voice sort of fresh. Mm-hmm. And that's how it started, really.
Had people noticed your bass voice at this point?
In the church choir, when we'd done a few sort of quasi sort of oratorio bits, bleeding chunks from oratorios. And I remember a lady sitting in the pew in front of me, turning around and saying, "Oh, Alastair, you should have your voice trained." And I thought, you could take that two ways.
Yes.
Either she's noticing that it's quite good, or she's saying, "Good grief,
You need help.
and quick." So it's just little things like that.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was always low. You know, it was always quite a low voice, and so that was kind of unusual. Yeah, fairly unusual. So then I thought that's what I wanted to do, the flute playing, and then I changed voice teacher. My father again got me to have a consultation lesson with a baritone at E&O who lived very close to us, called Geoffrey Chard, who was a contract baritone at English National Opera for many years before he was Australian before he moved back to Australia.
Okay.
And so I went there and had a consultation with him, and he said, you've got a good voice, you know. I'd like to teach you myself if I could, but I'm going back, repatriating to Oz.
Right.
But I'll tell you what, I'll put you in touch with my old teacher, who's at the Academy, a gentleman, a Canadian baritone called Bruce Boyce.
Oh, I've heard that name.
Yeah.
Did he teach quite a few people?
He did.
Right.
He taught Philip language, among others.
I see.
And
Okay.
so he was quite a renowned teacher at the Academy, and had a very illustrious career as a baritone himself. He was the first baritone to sing Delius's Mass of Life with Thomas Beecham.
Okay.
Ages ago, but so he was quite a renowned singer, and so I went to have lessons with him, and he was fantastic, and he really kind of cottoned on and thought, okay, yeah, we can do something with. I can do something with you. You know, you've really got this voice, you know, a real basso cantante voice, and he was fantastic, and he really introduced me to a much wider repertoire and you know more possibilities as a singer.
So he obviously had a big influence on you.
Certainly did.
Are there certain things that you remember him teaching you that you still do to this day, like kind of a foundation?
Yeah, no, I can't think of anything specific. No.
It's funny when I ask people that question, they say I can't really remember.
It's just
like,
kind of osmosis. It's just something, you know, that you just absorb. I can't. You know, having had lessons with him, I then had a few lessons with Rudolf Pierney, who was a lot more analytical and technical, and so I do remember some of the stuff that was more recent. We talked about on that one. But I think the other big influence on me as a singer was discovering the voice of Cesare Siepi, the great Italian bass who was at the Met for 25, 30 years. Listening to his recordings, just discovering his voice and thinking,
you hear that noise and you think, is that real? It's so beautiful.
I know, it's impossibly beautiful and elegant.
I mean, there are obviously other,
and even from at least in his heyday, even from so high to solo, and it's just got that elegance and poise.
Never feels like it's remotely pushed.
No,
it just feels like there's no effort involved.
No, that's right.
Whatsoever.
That's right.
Absolutely gorgeous.
So they are amazing recordings, and so that was the kind of gold standard, and that really made me think, oh my goodness, he's singing like a cellist. He's singing with line. He's singing like a great instrumentalist.
Do you know if he played any instruments?
I don't.
No, it's not something I thought of.
From all the stuff I've read about him, I don't think anything is said about anything about him learning an instrument.
No.
He may have done, quite possibly.
Yes. You've ended up singing.
Yeah.
Very similar repertoire.
Yeah.
To him, haven't you?
Sort of. I think.
He didn't do so much Rossini, from memory.
No, he didn't.
Maybe Basilio.
Basilio, absolutely. Maybe Mose in Egitto. But he wasn't a coloratura bass in that way. I don't think many people hadn't been discovered then.
No, well, I think that's one of the reasons why Samuel Raimi
Yeah.
really cornered the market. Is
Yes.
that when When he was discovered, there was nobody who could do what he did. Absolutely nobody.
That's right. And then there was this big Rossini revival, so he just caught the zeitgeist, you know.
Yeah.
As in a way, I kind of caught the tail end of that, because when I became well known, we still had CDs. There were a lot of period instrument orchestras around recording loads and loads of repertoire. So I was very fortunate in getting in on that, and doing a lot of Baroque and classical music with the period bands and conductors.
Yeah. Talking of CDs and the slight loss of CDs, I think that's a real loss, because the way I found most of my favourite singers was strolling around places like Tower Records and HMV. And I know it would seem like it's easier today because you can just go on your phones and go on Spotify. But it's not quite the same. There's too much there. You never stay on one recording for long enough to really decide whether it's good or not. And you go into a CD shop, there were booths where you go and listen to the CD. Everybody just took more time over it. I mean, that's how I discovered you. It's how I discovered John Tomlinson. It's how I discovered Philip Langridge, Adrian Thompson, who I didn't end up studying. I think it's a real loss. I think technology can be great for some reasons. But
yes, I agree, and I'm a slightly older generation, and I really miss that. We bought a car a couple of years back, and a sort of people mover, and very, very nice cars, Peugeot and 5008 second hand, and we thought, great, it's great. And then I was driving off, and I thought, hang on, where's the CD player?
Yes, they don't have them anymore.
Oh, they don't have them. My wife said, well, they don't have them anymore. My kids, grown up, says, well, just put it on your phone. And I go, oh no, I've got all these CDs that litter my car, and I just want to slot them in and just choose. Oh, I can't be bothered having playlists. Oh, God, spare me. I just want to put a hard disk in and hear it.
I still love CDs, and I love the index because it's got all the information about the artist, the orchestra, the composer, the back history. It's everything you need to know. You can do so much research from those inlets.
Absolutely.
And I think they're amazing. And they're still, they still exist and people still buy them, but you have to know where to go, and it can be a bit more hassle. You can't just walk into a high street and find them.
No.
I think it's a shame, but then
it is a shame.
I'm 41 and all my students say I don't know what I'm talking about.
No, I sympathise. I sympathise very much with you. The amount of time I've wasted just going through Tower Records or HMV in Oxford Street, just looking at all the CDs there.
It was a real passion for people, music lovers. It was a real good place to go.
It was.
And spend an hour.
It
was great. Okay, so going back to the main conversation.
What are we talking about?
So you then turned to singing. That was after you had finished at Guildhall?
Yes. Yeah. I tried to. There are. Yeah, so the flute's very, very popular. There are loads of flute players around and very, very few jobs. So to make ends meet, I did quite a bit of peripatetic teaching. I then got a job. I started singing in a chamber choir up in London called the Elizabethan Singers, and the director of that was a guy called Stephen Darlington, who was at that time Master of Music at St Albans Cathedral, St Albans Abbey. And he came up to me after one of the rehearsals and said, Alastair, I've got a vacancy for a part-time lay clerk, because one of our lay clerks has, he's hit the big time, or he's got more professional work and he can't combine the two, so we need somebody to come in.
Who was that? Just out of interest.
Who that was?
Yeah.
That was Stephen Charlesworth, or to his friends, Larry Adler, or older.
I kind of recognise the name.
Yeah.
Okay. I just thought I'd ask out of interest.
Who was with the BBC Singers for many, many years.
Okay. Right.
Among other, and the Monteverdi Choir. And, I thought, well, logistically, I can make it there. That's not too bad. Yeah. It was only a Friday evening. The commitment was just a Friday evening practice and two services on a Sunday.
Okay.
So it wasn't by no means full time, and so I thought, okay, that's a bit of extra money. I'll give it a go. So,
did you enjoy being a lay clerk?
I was never particularly comfortable with it. From a vocal point of view, I was still obviously I was only in my early 20s. I think my voice had quite a lot of settling to do. The style of singing didn't really suit me because being on the lower end of the spectrum, when the phrase got to a certain altitude and my colleagues who were more baritonal than I was, that was their golden part of their voice. It certainly wasn't the golden part of mine. So I had to quickly learn how to sort of take my foot off the gas and just sort of merge into the background and let them take over.
Okay.
Because I was scared that the only way I would be able to sing that would be at a volume that wouldn't be acceptable to the choir, to Stephen. Yes. And so there was a bit of miming that had to take place. I got quite good at it. So, you had to learn just when to sort of just back off.
Well, it's a distinct difference between choral singing and solo singing.
Well, it is.
Because as you go up, the voice will naturally get slightly louder.
Yes.
That can't be avoided. It just happens.
Yeah.
But in a choir, if everybody just goes with that,
yes,
the dynamics become meaningless.
Exactly.
So, I mean, you get voices which are better suited to one and better suited to the other. But it clearly wasn't something wrong with your top notes, because I would say, as well as coloratura, you're quite well known for your top notes.
Right.
You don't struggle with them, do you?
Or what? No, I mean normally, no, I don't. That's something that I believe I have mastered. Well, if that's not too strong a word, but I've really sorted that out as a technical issue.
So that was something you had, unlike the coloratura, which you had naturally. Was that something you had to work towards?
Yes, that was something that. Having a natural facility, it was something that I had to work in the right way to make that seamless transition over the passaggio and the top of the voice, and making them connect to each other and not sing and not make yourself hoarse or, or ruin the voice.
It's a really difficult for a naturally low voice. It's quite a difficult thing to do, and I know it can be difficult to talk about technique because people seem to feel things differently.
Yeah.
But if there are any young bassers watching, are you able to say how you made that transition? Kind of how you think about that part of your voice?
I think it was at that time I decided that the lower notes could probably look after themselves to a certain degree at least. What I needed to do was have the sense that I was positioning my voice at a slightly higher level, so that when I, at my optimum level, was a little bit higher than perhaps I had up till then.
Okay.
And then it made the higher notes more within reach. It didn't seem to be such a leap.
Okay.
In order to attain those notes, if you position your voice at a slightly higher level to begin with, that's how I made sense of it myself.
What do you mean by position it as a higher level?
That's a good question. I'm just making it up as I go along. I think it's just warming up the voice so that your core notes that you are most comfortable singing are around, for me at least, around A, B flat, A flat, between G and B flat.
Okay.
Okay. So that's that's where you spend most of your time, and that's where you feel most comfortable, and that's the kind of center of your voice. So that makes a leap up to above the stave, to the D's, the E's, the occasional F's. It's just a bit easier to make that leap. Whereas if your center is D or E or even F lower down, then it's kind of you just feel that there's a kind of a physical the physical leap is just that bit too uncomfortable.
I think that's probably the thing about singers is that when you're talking, especially with a voice like yours, you're talking around the bottom F or E quite a lot.
Do you think so?
I think so. I think so, because I even though my speaking voice is quite bright, if I were to then just go into monotone speaking, I speak on about a bottom A flat,
okay.
and your voice is lower than mine.
Right.
And then when I was listening to when John Thomason was sitting where you were, he was speaking to me. His voice was about an octave lower than both of us.
Through the floor, isn't it?
Yeah. So if we're speaking on those notes, then even singing in the middle of our range is an octave above that. So it does take a lot of getting used to. Like there's a difference between where you sing on average in your range compared to where you speak.
Yes, but
it's almost an octave.
Okay,
So I think what you're saying is very true, and probably a way that people don't approach their singing is that realization that you sing so much higher than you speak. Yeah. And that must be very true for sopranos.
I know. Yeah. I think the other thing is just being aware of resonance. I was made aware very early on of feeling the vibrations in one's head voice rather than letting it sit too low down. I think it was a lot to do. I mean, I was quite lucky that I had this notion that if I was buzzing, if I could feel the resonance, that was loud enough for me. I didn't need to push any further than that. And luckily, I didn't come up against too many conductors who then said to me, "No, you're not loud enough. You've got to." So I was able to sort of settle into that, into thinking that was a sufficient volume to sing at. Wherever it happened to be, and I kind of thought, well, if people go near me, it's not my problem. I've kind of modified my way of thinking since then. But that's what I held to at that time.
Okay. So, how long were you studying singing seriously before you won the was it the Decca Prize?
I won the Decca Prize. What was that? 86. And then I was just coming out of my flute playing period, and thinking that actually there was a lot more interest being taken in me as a singer than there was as just another flautist. And I then started taking it a lot more seriously and started doing a lot more auditions. And competitions and more amateur dramatic operatic.
So you already spent quite a lot of time on stage.
Yes. Which I really enjoyed. I just thought, oh, this is great. This is just playing around. Brilliant. Where I lived in Harrow, we had a very good opera society run by a guy called a lovely chap called Oliver Broom, and I joined their ranks as a very young singer, and he was very, very encouraging. And we did one of the productions was Count Henri, Rossini's Count Henri, which has a very florid bass roll. I mean, and it was just great. I was to the manner born. It was brilliant doing it in English, but that provided me with my first sort of stage experiences. I was very lucky to have a lovely friend at the Guildhall who I did a lot of. She accompanied me a lot as a flautist, and we had a trio together with a cellist, Liz Marcus, Liz Robinson, who still teaches at the Guildhall. Married to
an E&O coach?
No,
I don't think so. Okay.
And so I started going to her and she also coached voices. So I went to her, having not sung to her for ages. And I remember her saying, "Oh gosh, Alastair, your voice has really come on." So I started doing, going through song repertoire with her at that stage, rather than flute repertoire. And doing, as I say, doing lots of auditions, and then the Ferrier competition came along, and that was a big success, and put my name out there, as it were, for those that were interested in that sort of thing.
Was it already a very big competition at that time?
I think it was fairly, yeah.
What? So what year did you say?
That was 86, I think it was.
Okay.
I then, at roughly the same time, I auditioned for Opera 80, which is now English Touring Opera. It was called Opera 80 back then. and the music director was David Parry, and I got a contract. They offered me a contract. They were taking Don Giovanni and the Rake's Progress on tour, and they offered me the cover of Mazzetto and the Commendatore in the Don, and they offered me the role of Father Truelove in the Rake's Progress.
Okay.
Which was perfect. Nothing too big, nothing too scary. And so I was then left with the choice. I really had to make a choice because that was 3 or 4 months of my life on the road, as it were. I couldn't continue my singing, my flute playing commitments, or indeed my lay club job. I had to choose, so I decided to go for the stage, and I gave up all my flute teaching, and I handed in my notice at St Albans as well, which was lucky because it was at the same time that Stephen Darlington was leaving St Albans to go to Christchurch, Oxford as the boss man there, from which he's only just retired, I think.
Yes, he's been he's had a long tenure, hasn't he? Yeah. Must be doing something right.
He must be something. I later on, a few years ago, I was working with Toby Spence, who was also a lay clerk at one of the Oxford colleges, and he told me the story about Stephen saying to his choir, this singing lark, this music lark, it's not about the notes, it's about the notes.
Okay.
Yes, good. That's absolutely
good advice for young people.
It is, absolutely. Never forget that. I don't know if that's apocryphal, but anyway, we had a good laugh with Toby and I. So that's what I did. Yeah.
Okay. Was being on stage something that came naturally to you?
I didn't have any fear of it.
Okay.
I don't know where that was all about. Just been a show off. So yeah, I didn't have any qualms about that at all. Okay. Slightly later, I auditioned for the Opera Studio, National Opera Studio, and they. So I got in there. So I did a year there. So that was fantastic. On the stagecraft side, on the dramatic side, that was really incredibly useful. We had a lovely lady who taught us all stagecraft movement called Sheila Barlow, and she was in her 80s then, and she had been. She was a real incredible lady, and she was able to look at you and just size you up physically about what you needed to adjust in order to make the best of yourself in any stage situation. She was incredibly astute and a lovely lady to boot. So I found that absolutely fascinating, that whole stagecraft. We were very blessed with having very good visiting teachers and experts to come and put us through our paces. So I really got a huge amount out of that year. And then the annual showings at the end of the year were a huge success for me as well. That also went very, very, very well.
Were there any contracts that came out of that?
I think they did. Yes. I started then working for Welsh National Opera. I had a few nice contracts with them, and a couple of ENO as well. The Welsh thing was very, very good because Brian McMaster, who was at the time in charge there, wanted to do more sort of bel canto roles. So I was able to do Basilio and Lucia, Raimondo and Lucia, and then that led to some of the early Verdis, which was great. Nabucco's, Zaccaria, and Silva in Ernani, which was wow. I love that.
I've always thought Zaccaria a slightly insane role. Ernie Bailey writing for the bass is very tricky.
He didn't quite know what he was writing for.
He does sometimes give that impression. I mean, huge range.
Yeah.
Absolutely huge range.
Yes.
And I haven't heard very many voices who carry that role successfully. Obviously, Samuel Ramey, yourself. I actually, for the first time, found a recording of Nikolai Gerolov doing it as well.
Yes.
But I don't think he had the flexibility at the top of people like you and Sam. And I've never heard Cesare Siepi do it.
Yeah.
I think it's...
He did do that quite a lot.
Oh, did he?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
there's, you've got that barnstorming opening aria with the chorus,
yes,
and then the cabaletta. That is awake. You've
finishing on
started.
G flat. Or
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
But once you get over that, it's a little bit easier. But you have that. There's a beautiful prayer that Zachariah sings with all the cellos.
Oh yes,
which is just amazing. You've got a solo cello.
Vieni or Levita.
Yeah. Which is just magical, and to have a voice that can blast it out in that cabaletta and that aria at the beginning, but then fine it down and sing such a beautifully lyrical aria, prayer, as that, to find the singer that can do both in equally good measure. Very, very hard.
Yeah.
Very hard.
Well, I heard somebody in America not so long ago say the epitome of good singing is being able to sing every dynamic on every note, on every vowel. And I think, that's pretty much what you need for that role.
I think you're probably right. You're probably right.
So we're into the main bulk of your career.
Yeah.
Have there been any productions which really stand out for you as not just being really good productions, but had great colleagues and kind of moments where you just learnt a lot and it took you to that next level in your ability and your comfort on being on stage with kind of really high level companies? Because I often think people need a certain amount of pressure to kind of realise what they're capable of. And I sometimes think these days it's quite hard to get stage time.
Yes.
And so people never really learn what they're capable of. If you just sit in a practice room and practice, because that's the only opportunities that you're getting. And of course it's important to do that because you have to learn the notes somewhere and you have to go learn how to interpret or how to roll. But if you don't actually able to get on stage through lack of opportunities, it's very hard for you to fulfill your potential.
Very true.
So,
very true.
Are there any productions that stand out in your mind where you think actually doing this has been really good for me?
One in particular stands out, and that was a long time ago when I was at Welsh starting off, and we were doing a production, a revival of a production of Lucia di Lammermoor, and Charles McKerris was conducting, and he wanted to do it in a kind of authentic way, as much as you could do with Donizetti at that time. So he decided to do. There were no cuts. There's also, certainly with the baritone aria and a couple of duets, questions as to what key they should be in, and because they kind of drifted down over the years. So he put them back in their original keys.
Okay.
The other thing he did was to get the brass to face the stage. Apparently in that time it was common for a pit band to have the brass behind the conductor, and they would play to the stage.
Okay. Is that just to create a different sound?
That's to create, and also narrow bore trombones and all that kind of thing. So he was, yes, it's a kind of way of creating a different sound, but also so that the brass never swamp the singer,
right?
Because they're playing in the other direction. But it also gives the singer an idea as to what they're up against. You don't have the excuse. I'm sorry, I couldn't quite hear that. They are in your face. And so he was meticulous about balance for this, and he wanted this to use that kind of layer. That was the most obvious difference. I think there were a couple of other ones that he instituted for this particular revival, and he was an incredible conductor in many ways, but he was one of the few conductors that I even today I come across who actually had somebody out in the auditorium at all times, and he would often say, "Can you hear them? Can you hear them? Is the balance all right?" That was a huge of huge importance to him, especially when you're at W&O going on. You know, if we had a seating rehearsal in a different theatre on tour, you know, he wanted to know what that was all about. However, getting back to your point, I was actually on stage and I was singing my aria with Lucia at the beginning, and there's a cavaletta. And we were obviously doing the repeat, and I was trying to do my all the decorations and stuff. And I think we got to the end. I got to the end of the first time of this cavaletta, and I thought, I'm knackered. I don't know. Oh my God! I just thought I can't sing another note. I'm absolutely. And I just stopped. I said, I'm terribly sorry, Sir Charles. I'm just feeling I'm feeling very, very tired up here. And is there any way we can just? I just made it some excuse, but I was really worried. I just thought I haven't got the stamina for this. I don't know. My whole life flashed before me. I was thinking, oh God, how do I get out of this? I can't do this. I've got to sing the whole thing again with added notes. And I stopped. And as I say, I just said, I'm very sorry, but is there any way we can make it faster or something? Anyway, bless him. I mean, he could have been nasty. He could have said, what do you mean? But he said, no. I mean. No, it sounds absolutely fine from here. You sound great. It's absolutely fine. You know, don't worry. It's good. And that just gave me that moment to relax, or just to calm down. And it was only a few seconds, but his response was just what I needed to get myself back into a positive frame of mind.
Was it a confidence boost as well?
Yes, it was to hear him say, you know, it sounds absolutely fine from here, you know. Yeah. And I thought, oh, does it? Oh, okay, well, all right, maybe things aren't quite as bad as they seem at the moment. So we started again, and I got through it, and it was fine. Okay. And I just thought, okay, right, and breathe, just calm down. It's going to be fine. You can do it. You can do it.
I think those moments are really important because sometimes we really feel like we're struggling and we're ruining it for everyone else.
Yes.
And for somebody to say, it actually to me sounds no different, you sound great.
Yeah.
For somebody to give you that positivity in a moment which you think you're struggling, it's so important.
It absolutely is. And also, you know, it's occurred to me over the years that actually, you know, as singers, we're always being told what to do. And we're always being told what's wrong with what we're doing, okay? And you know, obviously, you know, the conductor wants it like this, and it wants like that, and you know, can you do this there? And no, you didn't do that there. Can you do that there? You know, so you're always being given this. You're being tested. You're being put on trial all the time, and that can be very. You know, if you haven't got an inner confidence, if you haven't got an inner strength, that can be so damaging, corrosive.
Yeah.
And so I've actually made it a point over the last few years. So if I'm working with a group of people and you know, I see somebody singing who I think they're doing a good job, I actually make it a point. I go up to them and say, that sounds really good. You know, I will give them positive feedback. I will say, I love your singing. I think it's really great. I think what you did there, that was great. Because I think we all need that.
Yeah.
And it's so often people assume, well, they know what they're doing. Why should I tell them that they're doing well?
They know they're great. Yeah. No, we don't. No,
we don't. I mean, one doesn't want to go over the top and be, do it to extremes, but just that little positive comment about somebody singing, about somebody's, you know, what they did on stage in a particular thing. We all need that. We all need that, and it's so easy just to overlook that.
I think that would probably mean quite a lot coming from somebody who's had a good career as well. Because if they've come up to you and actually genuinely think you're doing a good job, you know they wouldn't say that.
Yeah, we're not going to do that just because, you know, because
Yeah.
we just we wouldn't say anything. But so many times things aren't said, which I think need to be said, especially when it comes to positive reinforcement.
Yes.
And I think that can just make a difference to somebody, because if everybody as a performer, if you're feeling good about yourself, if you're confident in what you're doing, of course you're going to give a better performance.
Yes. Well, I've always thought
it's that doubt.
Yeah.
It's that little doubt going, no, you're not very good. Oh, that didn't sound very nice. Oh,
And
okay.
that can
what
really
did
stick
you
as well.
do that for?
Yeah.
There you go.
I think so. There's a singing teacher in America who's quite well known called Bill Schumann, and
Yes,
I was reading I was reading an interview with him, and he was asked, "What's the main thing that you teach your students?" And he said, "Well, two things spring to mind. The first is positivity. Singers react much better to positivity. If you come at them with a load of negativity, they won't take anything in, and if you kill that positivity, they probably won't want to carry on singing anyway. And that's kind of a bit self-defeatist as a teacher. Why would you want to do that to somebody?" He said the other thing, which I found really interesting, was humility.
Yes.
And it's an interesting combination, positivity and humility. And he said, no matter how good some of my pupils get and go on to have great careers, I have to remind them sometimes that however good they are, there might well be somebody in a church choir somewhere who could sing them off the stage. And I thought,
wonderful.
Well, that's very good.
That's
actually.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially from an American perspective, and I don't mean to diss Americans in general, or even in particular, but some American singers can be the most, big personalities and seem to have, confidence in lorry loads.
Yes.
When you first meet them, and you just think, whoa, oh my God. So yeah, humility is perhaps that's slightly missing in some
Yeah.
I would say, but. Yeah. On the other hand, I've known some great American singers who were fantastic and have bucket loads of humility as well.
Yeah. So what have you got coming up in the next few months or years?
Along with a lot of other singers, the pandemic was pretty brutal, and it's taken a while for things to kind of for the diary to sort of get back to what it was like beforehand. Although actually it's been a bit of a struggle. Actually, it's filling my diary the last few years.
Okay.
With or without the pandemic. But what I've got coming up at the moment, I'm rehearsing for Barbara Seville at ENO in Basilio, revisiting that.
Have you done that before?
I did it on its last outing at ENO in 2017, and so looking forward to doing it again this time. And it's great cast. It's a Jonathan Miller production. And we've got the wonderful Peter Relton, who's reimagining it, the staging for us.
Okay.
And very good cast. And we just started rehearsals, so we'll see how that goes. Then I have a bit of a gap. Hopefully, moving house in that gap. And then I'm up to the Buxton Festival, who have decided to do Verdi's Ernani.
Wow.
So I will be singing Silva, which I'm very much looking forward to, because it's a fantastic role, a fantastic opera, not often done, but the tenor role and the soprano role are killers. So that's probably why. But it's a fantastic Victor Hugo story based on historical events in the 16th century, a lot of Spanish Inquisition, and the role I play, he's an absolute bastard. He's just an awful person, human being, but that's wonderful. It's just, you can't be too evil to do this sort of role. You've got carte blanche to be as horrible as you can, and I'm particularly horrible to the soprano and the tenor, especially the tenor at the end, forcing him to kill himself. But it's it's one of those. It's grand guignol, and I have this horn, that I have to remind him of his oath that he's given me, and just when he thinks he's on the sunny uplands of marrying his beloved Elvira, who I wanted. He hears this horn because he's made an oath that whenever I sound this horn, he's got to kill himself. It's a preposterous plot, but you've got to be there.
And most of them are. To be
they
fair.
are. They are.
But
I have to say, it's a real blood and guts, full-blooded Verdi opera, and it's got some fantastic music in it. The final trio, tenor, soprano, bass, is I was going to say to die for, but he actually does literally die at the end of it. So I'm looking forward to that.
It's an amazing opera house as well, Buxton.
Yeah,
it's got a great acoustic. It's
great.
very easy to sing. You must have sung it.
I haven't sung it. No,
you haven't?
no,
okay.
No.
It's it's beautiful, and Buxton's beautiful as well.
Yes, yeah.
And apart from if it rains a lot, in which case, the whole middle part of the town floods, which can be problematic. But
well, we're used to flooding at the moment. I've been there. I've got my wellies and flippers. We'll see what happens. So I've got that, which will be nice. And then I'm at Covent Garden for a new production of The Tales of Hoffmann.
Wow.
So I'm Spallanzani in that one. Yeah.
Okay. So are they splitting the four villains as four villains?
Yes. You know what? I haven't really looked at it that closely.
Unfair question.
Yes. It was one of those that was supposed to be done in the pandemic, that then got put back and back and back, and they're finally doing it now. But I've got time to have a look at it. So that's not till October, November.
Okay.
And then after that, it's a big wasteland. Who knows? Okay. A couple of possibilities.
Okay.
But nothing as yet firmly inked into the diary.
Yes, we all face periods like that, don't we?
You know, things are coming in later and later. And you know what? It is what it is. I'm as old as I am. I've had a good run. I'd love to be able to sing more, but you can only do what you're offered, and
that's very true.
And that's the way it is. We've sold the house, got rid of the mortgage. We're a bit more financially secure.
I mean, that is an achievement in itself. Very many people don't get that far.
Yeah. So we have to think of the practicalities,
absolutely,
as it were. It's one of those weird professions. I came across this wonderful Hector Berlioz quote. He said, it's not enough to have the luck to be talented. You have to also have the talent to be lucky.
Okay.
I thought, very true there.
Something the conductor here, the director of music, Iestyn Evans, has said to me. He said, now I've started the sentence, I can't remember exactly what he said.
Sorry.
Give me 1 second. All right, yes, somebody said to him that the more I practice, the luckier I get.
Yes.
And I think there's a certain element of truth to that. You can't, which way round is it?
Yes.
Because they both go together. I mean, everybody in the singing profession obviously has a huge amount of talent. And those who get the furthest also seem to be the people who put the work in. But that in itself isn't enough. There's a strange combination, and there are other elements, and there are all the other skills that go with it as well. A lot of people are very natural networkers.
Yes.
But it is also something you can learn. So there are all these different elements.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think that's a good note to end on. Thank you very much, Alastair. It's a real joy for me to meet you and interview you. Because like I said, if it weren't for you, I'm not sure I would have developed my passion for singing quite so much. So thank you so much.
Oh, it's a great pleasure.
That's it for now. Thank you everybody for watching, and we'll see you anon.